There have been clickbait videos about this for years, but it actually might come to pass. Tesla might actually develop their own phone, but wait, there's more. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I've actually wanted to do this episode for about a week now, but I've been a little hesitant to do it because it feels like I'm entering clickbait territory, but I'm really not, because I actually want to talk about Tesla developing their own phone, and I'm going to do the basic reporter thing. I'm going to do the what, why, when, where, who, the 5 W's that you have to ask. And I actually think that Tesla might develop more than a phone as well, and it would actually be really, really reasonable for them to do so. So why this video now? Well, it appears that Elon Musk, in the former incarnation of Twitter, that CEO version of Elon Musk, has gotten into quite the battle with Apple about whether they will allow Twitter to be released on their platform. I have a feeling that behind the scenes there's some negotiations going on. If you don't know, Apple charges 30% tax on anything that's purchased through the App Store. So anything you buy, if you purchase an app on your phone and it's a $10 app, the developer gets $7 and Apple gets $3. But beyond that, if there's a $10 per month subscription, the person who's selling that subscription gets $7 and Apple gets $3. So in the case of Twitter, we're looking at $8 subscriptions. So Apple's taking about $2.40 from that. So that leaves Twitter with a lot less revenue. And I think that part of what's going on right now is that Elon Musk is using Twitter as a bit of a megaphone to enter into negotiations. He's doing, he seems to do very hardline negotiations with other companies and other individuals. He doesn't do it gently. How about that? So he started, grousing about the fact that that there's this internet tax on Apple's part and also, of course, on Android's part as well. But there are easier ways around Android. You can buy things outside the Android store if you want to, much more easily than purchasing things for your iPhone without going through the iPhone store. So anyway, Elon started complaining about that tax, and the next thing you knew, at least according to Elon Musk, is that Apple is threatening not to approve Twitter as an app on their App Store. And if they do that, they pretty much just, they killed Twitter, because they've taken away, most people use most things these days on their phone. And if you consider that iPhones are, let's say, 25% of the phones in the world that use Twitter, it probably might be a little bit more than that. But anyway, if that's the case, then you're just cutting off 25%, and also a relatively wealthy 25%, because a lot of the people who own iPhones tend to have a higher, income demographically and so forth. All statistics, but it would be really bad news for Twitter if Apple cut them off and said they couldn't do this. So that's the next thing. And then all of a sudden today, Elon Musk has been talking about how Apple apparently has been telling developers that they are not allowed to have certain things. They're not allowed to filter for searches on certain terms. I noticed one thing, and I'm not even going to say it. I'll put a picture of it up here so you can read it if you want to. But basically, that there is coming to light some evidence that there has been some censorship on Apple's part, and they're not telling the consumer. And I will tell you that I was a developer for years, I think starting around 2010 or 2011 through about 2015 or about 2015. So about 4 years, I developed for iOS and also for the early Apple Watches as well. And I found it really, really frustrating. Their policies were really, really draconian. It was very difficult to get your app approved. And, I was a guy. I'm just developing apps myself. And so having to go through all of those steps without any kind of team meant that I would develop an app, and then I would have to wait for it to get approved, and then it wouldn't get approved, and then I would have to go through all these steps to make sure that it could get approved and fit all of their stuff. So Apple is pretty draconian about this. And then also, if I wanted to sell the app and I sold it for $1 or something, I only got 70 cents out of that. So it was a very frustrating experience. And eventually there were so many big players and the whole model went to freemium, and I just couldn't make enough money to justify it. So I stopped developing for the iPhone and for the Apple Watch. But I remember the experience, and I think Elon today, he actually asked, he said to people, does anybody know that there's this hidden 30% tax on subscriptions and purchases and stuff through the Apple Store? And I think most people don't know that, but I certainly knew it because I was subjected to it as I was developing for Apple. So anyway, while I do love my Apple products, and I'm recording this on a Mac Studio right now, and I use an iPhone and I've got an Apple Watch and all this stuff, they are certainly not saints. They know a good thing when they've got it. They really like this 30% that they can get out of everybody. In fact, fact, I think it's one of their biggest profit drivers. They make a lot more money from that than they do selling their hardware, and they like their subscriptions. So they certainly don't want this to end. They have a very vested interest in keeping this going. They had a fight with the developers of Fortnite, was it Epic? I can't remember who developed Fortnite. But anyway, whoever developed Fortnite, they had a big battle with them, and they basically just canceled them from their store, and these guys had to come back to them, and they had to basically get reinstated and everything. So, Apple has an immense amount of power, and as Elon Musk said, it's basically a duopoly. It's Google and Apple have control over most of the applications that you're allowed to get on mobile devices. And, that leads to a situation where abuse could happen. So a duopoly of people who are charging a lot of money and also restricting a lot of things that you're allowed to do on their platform is the why. This is the reason why Elon Musk would consider building a Tesla phone. I'm calling it a Tesla phone. We're going to get to the who in a little bit. But anyway, this would be the reason why it would even make sense for him to do it. Even previous to him purchasing Twitter, I would have said this is a ridiculous thing and it is clickbait, but suddenly it's becoming something that's starting to look a lot more reasonable. Then we get to what in my mind might actually be a more interesting thing, which is the what. So obviously we could get a, Tesla phone. So it could have a T on the back of it instead of an Apple, and it could look very similar to that. Most phones these days are big blocks with a big screen, and it's a touch screen, and you do the same thing. So the opportunity to build something like this with relatively commodity parts would make sense. I think that actually if Tesla was going to do this, or, Tesla, we're going to get to the who in a minute. But anyway, whoever would do this, it would actually make more sense for them to also develop at least a laptop computer at the same time. So they would not just be competing with Apple on the phone front, but they would actually be competing with Apple on the hardware front overall. They could make laptops and potentially even small desktop computers. Then we get to the who. It makes the most sense for Tesla to do this. I'm going to explain this in just a minute with a how, which is an extra thing to add on to this. But anyway, it makes the most sense in my mind for Tesla to do this, although I could see Tesla spinning something off. Me and Randy Kirk, if you haven't checked it out, you could check out this video. Randy has this idea that what Tesla should do is spin off Optimus and have it be its own company. In my mind, the best thing for the who would be for Tesla to spin off its own subsidiary company to manufacture these products rather than having it be Tesla, just because number one, Tesla doesn't need the distraction, and number two, it could, once you start combining too many things, you start getting into weird monopoly issues and all of that. And so, I know Elon's trying to build this X corporation that will encompass everything. And by the way, this is another reason why, right? You could have this X corporation could start manufacturing hardware in the form of computers, and that's another piece of this gigantic puzzle that he's putting together. So there is an even bigger reason that Elon Musk might consider building a phone and potentially a laptop computer as well. But anyway, Tesla or some sort of Tesla subsidiary would be the ideal entity to create this product. And I'll get to that in the how in just a minute. As for the where and when, the where I guess would probably be a place like in California, maybe the, Palo Alto Tesla headquarters, or they could move it to Texas as well. It's one of those situations where you need a lot of really good software and hardware people, so it might make sense to leave it in Silicon Valley. At least the design team could do it there, and then the builds could be done in a place like Texas. They could build an ancillary building near their gigafactory to manufacture these things. And remember, phones and laptops and desktops are tiny things compared to cars, so you wouldn't need nearly as big of a facility to build these as you do to be able to build something like a car. As for the when, this could actually be going on right now. There could be a skunk works at Tesla's Palo Alto headquarters where there's a group of people that Elon said, hey, what would you think about if you wanted to design a phone? How would you do it? They've got all of the capabilities. They've got all the facilities to make this happen, at least on a prototype scale. And they've got probably enough engineers who are really, really talented, both software and hardware engineers, that they would be able to do something like this in a skunk works type of environment and just check out whether it would be reasonable to try to compete with the likes of Apple or Android. And finally, that takes us to the how. That's the thing that I think most people think would stand in the way of Tesla, right? You've got a car company, and yeah, they've got full self-driving and all of this kind of stuff, but they don't manufacture phones or computers. But wait, they do, right? That's the thing. Tesla has manufactured their own hardware 3, and they've obviously got hardware 4 in the pipeline, which is very, very close to release at this point. I'm not arguing that hardware 3 would make any sense to put into something, but hardware 4, which is the next generation, supposedly built on the 4 to 5 nanometer scale, very, very small scale for the gates and everything, would make an ideal laptop type of computer chip. So you wouldn't have 2 of these anymore, you would have 1. And if you think about the full self-driving board currently, it operates at 100 watts for the whole thing. So that's 2 main chips plus all the ancillary stuff. So if you cut that in half, you could basically have a board that operated at 50 watts, which is a pretty reasonable power envelope for a laptop type computer. Additionally, Tesla buys boatloads of touchscreens, which just so happen to be in the 15, 17 inch range, which are laptop sized displays. And those are already touchscreens. They're very, very robust. So if you start thinking about this, they could buy some memory kind of off the shelf. They could utilize hardware 4 chips. They could utilize a bunch of standard parts for hard drives and things like that. They could utilize their supplier, which I believe is Samsung, that makes their displays for them. And they could package that up in, some sort of machine grade aluminum or something like that, similar to what Apple does. And they could make a laptop really relatively easily. Now, as for building a phone, that would actually take, in my mind, a whole lot more work, which is actually the reason why I said if Tesla was going to do this, if Elon Musk wanted to, there would be no reason for them not to develop a laptop at the same time, and maybe a desktop based on the same chips as well. But in order to build a phone, number one, everything has to be squished down to be a lot smaller. You have very, very tight, this is a tiny little thing where you've got all this in. You also need really, really good cameras, which, by the way, Tesla has access to through Samsung because they purchase a lot of cameras from them. So they have really good supply deals for all of these things. But the biggest thing is they would have to develop some sort of chip based on likely the ARM architecture in order to run this. So there would be a lot of work involved to develop a piece of hardware. Now, they could use something like Snapdragon or something like that. So they could purchase off the shelf, but they also have people in-house that develop chips. And so they could actually do that themselves. That, in my mind, would take longer. I think the laptop, they could honestly slap together a laptop in a week or 2. I think it would be that easy for them to do that. Now, mass producing it would be a whole different matter, but they could put one together very, very rapidly. But it would take them either taking a bunch of off-the-shelf parts and putting them together in an interesting fashion, or developing their own chip. And developing their own chip could easily take a year to 2 years. So the phone itself might be a much longer term project if they don't already have something. And again, who knows? Tesla's always working kind of skunk-worky kind of stuff, and they're not telling us about. For all we know, they may already have ultra-low power, ultra-small chips that are designed for something like a phone. They may be intended to be used for something like Optimus, but they could be used for a phone. So all of this stuff kind of blends together. This all really, really melds. Tesla's got the manufacturing prowess to do all these things at large scale. They've got the logistics. They have the supply chain contacts that they need. They have the prowess in-house. Building the software would be a thing. Either they would have to be another Android entity, or they'd have to develop their own OS, probably based on Unix or something like that. That would make the most sense for them to do. But, again, they have people that have done this. And then if they do that, they'll also have to have developers and stuff because, this phone is relatively useless if it doesn't have any software on it. And that is where I see Twitter coming in, because if we look forward maybe 6 or 8 months with the Twitter engineers on staff and the restaffing of it with really, really excellent coders, they could be tasked, a bunch of engineers from there could be tasked with building the software stack that goes on the hardware that Tesla develops, and building a bunch of the base apps like web browsers, Twitter, obviously, YouTube, all of the kind of big apps that you need to have on a phone in order for people to find that a reasonable option to use. And then, of course, would come the marketing. One of the big problems right now is that if you're not running Android or Apple's iOS, people don't really want to buy the phone. There are other OSs out there, but they're very, very unpopular. People don't want to buy them. Developers don't develop for them, et cetera, et cetera. So it's this unfortunate negative cycle that you can't get out of. So Tesla, of course, and Twitter, if they were doing the software, would have the capacity to be able to get get a certain amount of users to purchase the product just based on Elon Musk and just based on Tesla and just based on his track record, people might be interested, but you really need, 100, 200, 300 million users of your product in this kind of category in order to make it a really viable competitor for Android or for Apple's iOS. So that's a really big, if, and who knows. Again, in my mind, I think that Tesla would actually have a much easier time developing a laptop than a phone, but I also don't know if they weren't developing the phone and they weren't developing the operating system already. I don't know what the benefit to them would be of developing the laptop by itself. But if they develop the phone, I see no reason why they shouldn't develop a laptop as well, because they'd have pretty much everything they need already in place in order to make that happen. And then finally, let's talk really zany land. What about Dojo? So we've got, the Dojo tiles, those really big giant things that they're using in their rack servers and that they're building. One of the problems with building a computer like this is when you build relatively few chips, the chips themselves are really expensive because, again, you're not getting the economy of scale. But what if you could produce hundreds of thousands of these things and sell them as rack servers? So if they were going to develop an OS and if they were going to develop, apps for all of these things, why couldn't they build this as a rack computer? So you could put one Dojo chip or something like that, one Dojo tile, one of those big things, into, or a modified version of that, into a rack, and you could sell that as an individual thing. So people who wanted high performance neural network type of training and operations would be able to use the Dojo chip, and that would give them a massive amount of power, and that would also then put Tesla into competition with companies like NVIDIA, etc. And speaking of neural networks and stuff, one final why that I'll put into the mix of things here for the hypothetical that they might do is another reason why Tesla might want to develop a phone and or a laptop and or a desktop and or a server rack would be because software, as Andrej Karpathy talked about, a while back, software is moving from 1.0 to 2.0, and software 2.0 is all about neural networks. And if you haven't cut that episode, definitely check that out if you're interested. But basically what we're moving from is traditional code, which is hard coded and it's just running loops and things like that, to working on neural networks, which is all about matrix multiplication. So it's multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add, and things like the iPhone now have neural network accelerators in them. Well, what has Tesla done in their chip designs except create massive neural network accelerators? So they could build something that not only was competitive with the space in the phone and laptop, etc. space, they could build something that leapfrogs them and actually is designed to run software 2.0. So the entire operating system, all of the apps, all of that kind of stuff could be based around neural networks and the power of neural networks as opposed to traditional coding. And if Tesla did that, that would give them a really big reason why to do this, because then suddenly they're no longer beholden to these, to Google and to Apple for their app development and everything, which is very, very frustrating. And by the way, Tesla, if Apple wanted to punish them, they could take away the Tesla app on this phone as well. And that would be a pretty serious problem. So just like with mining and refining, where Tesla's like, we don't really want to do it, but we'll do it if we have to. Here you've got the other end of that, which is like, we don't really want to have to develop our own hardware, but if we need to, we'll do it. But a really good goose for that could be that these products could actually leapfrog the current products. They could be designed around software 2.0 and designed, the OS, everything from the ground up could be designed all around using neural networks to the most efficient and maximum capabilities that computers have. And think about what could happen in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years and build an OS that's designed for that rather than one that was developed, 20 or 30 years ago and that's being kind of layered on top of itself. And if any companies could do that, it would be Elon Musk's companies. And the more I've thought about it the past several weeks and months, and especially in the last 24 hours or so, the more excited I get about this. I would actually be pretty excited to, number one, see more competition in the space, but number two, to see what Tesla and Twitter and even SpaceX in terms of materials and things like that could do with a phone or a laptop or a desktop or a server rack. It would be really, really interesting to see that. I would love to see the competition, and it kind of makes me excited. I would love it if they would actually announce that they would do this. I think that spinning off a company would be the best idea, kind of a subsidiary company, so that it wasn't sucking down resources and causing a bunch of Tesla shareholders to freak out about the fact that Tesla is too divided and thinking about too many things. But Tesla is an AI company. That's what Elon talks about. They're an AI company, and an AI company needs AI hardware in order to operate. And the best way to create mass economies of scale and also at the same time earn a lot of profits is to develop this hardware yourself and compete with the likes of Google/Android and Apple and their iOS and their Mac operating system and things like that. So this could be a really exciting time. And it's, again, like I said, it's quite possible that Tesla could be working on this right now. We just don't know about it, but we could hear about it 6 months to a year from now. And if that happens, things are going to get really interesting. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it fun and thought-provoking, and maybe you got a reaction to either anger or happiness or whatever it was, but definitely let me know in the comments what you think. And of course, please like and subscribe if you can. That would be wonderful. It really, really helps out the channel. I appreciate it. And speaking of appreciating things, I really appreciate my Patreon patrons. Thank you all so much. I actually have begun a conversation about this on Discord with my Patreon patrons. So if you want to join the conversation, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on and on. So check it out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out Webull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a Powerwall, or anything on Amazon, hint, hint, it is the holiday season, so go shopping on Amazon, but click on the link first. Anyway, that all helps out the channel. Thank you so much. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.